And you might be watching this on Wednesday at 8 o'clock, but I'm pre recording this actually. So you may have just found it at that time, but I'm not at my usual time. I'm actually going a bit early because I was going to be away. I wasn't going to be around Wednesday evening. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to be. So I thought I'd put it out there a little bit early and just have a little pastor's chat, at least in one I can. And so if you're not watching this live, don't worry. We'll be back probably at a regular time next week. But for this week, just a thought. I was putting out a thought there. If you found this on Facebook or if you found it on YouTube, like we normally stream, just to think about something I've noticed just of late. It's interesting. Father John actually was the first to say this. As we've come out of COVID and we've kind of moved into this new season, so I think it's kind of nice. A lot, obviously the restrictions and things have lifted, and I don't say it's exactly back the way it was. I'm not sure if we want to go back to the way it was, but we're into a kind of I think a more of a regular season or a little more normal time. And about a third of the parishioners, I think, that we saw before COVID are with us still. That's great. They kind of hunkered down and they stayed with us, and that was really good. About a third, I think, have left for various reasons. There are different parishes, or they've some have passed away. Sadly, we've had quite a few people pass in the last year. I think I think it's getting close to 20 parishioners, like regular, every day, every Sunday kind of parishioners. And so we get to pray for them, and that's true. And then about a third are new people. Like, I don't mean to be shocked by that or surprised, but it just seems like, again, I just noticing this last weekend as well, that a large number of young families now that come to the 11 and some, I think to the 9 as well, and some of the other masses, they're new to us. We don't necessarily know them. I'm not sure if they're coming from other parishes or they're just sort of kind of finding us somehow. It's just kind of interesting. So this is a new phenomenon. I said Father John kind of named it first. He said, he just meets someone almost every weekend. That's new. Sometimes it's in the confessional. Sometimes it's just after mass. Sometimes you get in conversations with people. And this is a trend that I've seen kind of across the board, a number of different places. I'm not going to get into obviously details, and people check us out, or they come by, or they've heard about us. I'm not really sure what the whole story is, but it's a trend that I find both very hopeful. Now, again, we're talking ones and twos. I think I might have mentioned this a few weeks ago, but if one or two people can pretty spontaneously find their way back to a parish, then I think there's probably more. And I think we need to be praying for that. I think we need to be kind of open to it. Like it's something, I think Father John years ago had this homily he was preaching on the prodigal son, that most of us imagine ourselves as the son, maybe needing forgiveness, and maybe the father giving forgiveness in that particular case. But what about the older brother? He always gets kind of that bad kind of rap. And, people start coming back to our church and they're sitting in our pew or taking our parking spot, or maybe it causes a little difficulty for us. Are we happy and delighted in this? And I think we should be, because it seems to be the kind of the trend of the moment. I mean, again, I don't tenuous. It's still early on. It might just be again back to school, back to routine, but it seems to be a new thing happening. I heard it described today. Someone was referring to it at the office. They called it about the early rains. Now, that's interesting for us. Like, rain is something we get a lot of, certainly snow in the wintertime, rain in the summertime. We don't really have a dry season. Maybe we're in it now, like the end of August, early September. But in the East, where that came from, it was one of the Old Testament prophets in Jerusalem, Habakkuk, I think his name, and he talked about the early rains. See, they had a wet season and a dry season, so most of the year it was pretty much desert. But they did have the rains, and the rains were very, very important, because when the rains came, and that season of rain is when you planted, because that's when there was life. And this is the early rains. So those first few rainfalls, that first drizzle, that first, when you're out walking and you sort of feel the rain, you think, oh, here we go. Do I have my jacket on? Do I have an umbrella? And mess up my golf game. We don't always see it in the same way, but for the Middle East, of course, no irrigation, and water was everything. Water was life. And so the early rains were an indicator that, yes, there was going to be another planting and another harvest and another year and a new season of life. And it just seems like this is the early rains, the first sprinkles that are coming down that are very, very welcomed. It's been a hard season in our church. I think we've come through a difficult time in the last 20, 30 years. The confusion of the 70s, after we talked about quite a bit about the council, Vatican II and how that was implemented, and then sort of the scandals of the 80s, and then all the stuff about clustering in the 90s, and it's been hard, the millennial stuff, and that didn't quite pan out, and we lost John Paul II, and what does that mean now? Like, it's just been hard. It's been a hard time to be Catholic. Wouldn't it be nice that we're entering into another season? A season where people, again, it's not that there's so much the disillusionment with the church, that happened a generation ago. It's a disillusionment, I think, in secularism. It's the great promise that this was all going to be just wonderful and great and growing, and it just didn't happen. And so now you got a second or third generation, maybe that have grown bitter towards the church. Okay, fair, and that's out there. But I think there's just as many that are just saying, look, what do I do now? Where do I go? Who's going to give me meaning in my life? Who's going to give me a sense of purpose or a sense of hope? And this is where I think as a church, again, we still have to be on mission. I think we have to be outward facing. But like the father, the prodigal son, it's not so much out chasing people down. It's just out waiting for the first signs that they're starting to return. And if they do return, then to be welcoming and to be friendly and to be warm and to be ready to receive them and say, okay, where you been? Like, what's going on? Like, what's on your heart? Like, how can we help you? How can we serve you? How can we help you make sense of this? You might need some assistance. It's like, I think Pope Francis, sometimes he talks about an aid station, where you do triage and you try to work with people and say, okay, is this a serious thing? Is it a relatively minor thing? Do you just need to be received? Like, what's going on here? And again, wouldn't that be nice? So we don't have to do the door-to-door so much, although that's still not a bad idea. It's mostly keeping an eye on our door and saying, Lord, if you send something or someone or some family, I'm going to make an effort to find out who they are. I want to find out who their names are. If I can be a part of their life, I can offer them a sign of hope or a sign of encouragement, that I'm glad to see them. This is good. That maybe this story doesn't end with our generation. I think it may have a few more twists and turns in it yet. So it's just a thought. It's all. It's a simple thought. I'm not going to try to drive that anywhere. I don't want to necessarily control it. I don't necessarily want to sort of take credit for it. It's not my doing. But I've noticed it, and I've noticed it more and more to the point that I thought I'd share it. I was going to put it out there. Where are we going to be saying this time next year? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say, yeah, our trend, our first rains have actually turned into a season of life, and that life is bringing more life, and that brings hope. So my dear friends, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever life finds you at these days, may the good Lord continue to watch over, guide, and protect you. May the saints and angels intercede for you, and the Blessed Mother wrap you in the mantle of her peace. May God bless you this season and all seasons in his love and his grace. Good night to you now. Take care. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.